Hi everyone, the Gay Guide here, and today I want to talk about how to bottom for anal sex. Because I remember when I first learned that gay guys had anal sex, it scared the shit out of me. Pardon the pun. I mean, my biggest concern was, doesn't it get messy? Don't, you poop out of your butt, and if you're gonna stick something in your butt, don't you get poop on it? That was my biggest concern. I didn't even think about the pain until a while later when I heard how painful it could be. But it was definitely one of the things that I had the most questions about, and it was also one of the more taboo topics. So I definitely couldn't ask anybody, especially while I was still in the closet and didn't want anyone wondering why I was so curious about anal sex. So today I want to give you an in-depth discussion on two of the more popular topics about anal sex: how to clean up and how to take that first insertion with minimal pain. And then I'm going to finish up with sort of my top 5 overall tips on a better anal sex experience. I remember back when I was in denial and I had no one to ask all of my questions, I went looking online for more information about anal sex, and I found this horror story. It wasn't even about gay anal sex, it was about a guy and a girl, but things started going wrong, and by the end of the story there was poop and puke and blood and guts flying all over the room, and it really scared me, and it actually made me scared of anal sex for the longest time. So of course, when thinking about topics for the Gay Guide, this was one of the first ones on my list. So let's get started with the first subtopic: cleanliness. I recently talked to an expert about this, Dr. Evan Goldstein, and he gave me some great advice. So let's start first with a bit of anatomy. As food is digested and travels through your digestive tract, it eventually winds up in your colon. And this is at the very end of the process, and basically the colon's job is to suck as much water out of your digested food as possible to be recycled and used elsewhere in your body. When the colon has basically sucked as much water as it can from your digested food, it passes that now poop into your rectum. Now, the rectum is important to talk about because it's basically the field of play when you're talking about anal sex. The rectum is a long expandable tube that is designed to hold your poop and then smoothly pass it from your colon out of your body into your toilet. And basically, if everything goes well under ideal conditions, your poop should be one solid, mostly dry mass that passes cleanly through the rectum, through the anus, and into your toilet. And the rectum is nice and self-lubricated, which means there shouldn't be any pieces left behind. The anus is not so lubricated. It's mostly skin and muscle, so you'll definitely still want to clean that area up. But with a quick shower and making sure that your anus is clean, you really should be good to go if you took a nice, healthy poop recently. And in my experience, this is really how it works in what I call ideal conditions. When your colon is able to dry everything up nicely, your poop becomes a nice, solid mass, and you can pass it cleanly out of your body. And you can achieve these ideal conditions with a healthy diet, no greasy food, and lots of fiber. And even if you want some added help, they have what they call now cleanliness supplements, which is basically a specialized fiber supplement that's made for men who have anal sex. And the fiber in the supplement acts as a sponge that really soaks up all the material. It helps keep it, even more dry than what your colon could achieve, and helps it, this nice solid mass pass smoothly through your body. And really, I found that the combination of a healthy diet and taking a fiber supplement every day really helps keep me good to go as far as anal sex is concerned. You always need a shower to clean up the area and make sure you're clean down there. But other than that, I really don't have too many concerns about cleanliness. But those are ideal conditions, and I know that conditions aren't often ideal. So when it is too late to basically change your diet, or too late to take a fiber supplement, or, there are many other reasons why things don't run cleanly. You could be under a lot of stress. You could have drinking some coffee that day. Those sort of things sort of mess with your system, and it doesn't work as well as it might. So sometimes you need to clean up. And for that, they have what they call an anal douche. So an anal douche is a device, here it is, that's basically designed to squirt water up through your anus into your rectum to basically clean out any poop particles that may be hanging around in there. It's really very simple. It's got a bulb and a spout. You fill the bulb with water, you put the spout on, you squirt it up there, hold it, and then release. And you basically do this 2 or 3 times till the water runs clear, and then you should be good to go. They also have shower attachments that work very similarly, where there's no bulb, it's just sort of a constant stream of water from your shower. And if you don't have one of these devices, in a pinch, you can actually get an enema from your local pharmacy. I think Fleet makes a very common one. But if you are using those store-bought enemas, definitely dump whatever liquid that they came with and use fresh, clean water. Because that liquid that it comes with is usually filled with laxatives and other things that you don't need if you're just cleaning out for anal sex. My best tips for anal douching are to use lukewarm water. Nothing too hot, nothing too cold. Don't use too much. Really only half to 3/4 of a cup is all you need. You'll still want to fill the whole bulb, simply because you don't want to be squirting air up in there. So you fill the whole bulb, and then actually I like to fill up the stem as well, because that can hold some air that you, again, don't want to be squirting up when you're cleaning out. So fill the bulb, fill the stem, and then apply lots of lube to the tip, and apply some lube to your anus. And basically, you can do it in the shower, you can hover over your toilet, but basically stick that tube up there, squirt the half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of water, basically hold it in there, let it sit for a minute until your body says, okay, expel, and then basically let it go. And repeat this process 2 or 3 times until the water is running clear. And then once it is running clear, again, always make sure that you're jumping in the shower, cleaning up the area with some soap and water before you engage in any activity. Now, I want to repeat the advice not to use too much water, because I think that's one of the biggest mistakes guys use. They want to squirt as much water as they can. They think that's going to get them cleaner, and actually it could make things a little worse, because you actually don't need that much water to fill up the rectum. And if you put more than you need to fill it up, all that really does is it expands it, it stretches it out, or the water goes further up and winds up in your colon. And the problem when that happens is that might not come out right away. That might not come out for another 10, half hour, or 2 hours later, and when you really don't want that water to be coming out. So don't use too much, and I think you can avoid that problem pretty well. Now, Dr. Goldstein advises that douching every once in a while is perfectly fine, but you don't want to do it too often, because what happens is when you douche, not only are you rinsing any poop particles out there, but you're also rinsing out that natural lubricant that naturally lines your rectum. And if you wash away that lubricant too much, that can lead to dryness, which can lead to irritation, which can lead to sometimes tearing during sex if you're not careful. And he also advised that sometimes, no matter how many times you try and rinse and try and clean out, the water just doesn't run clear. Because you know what? Your body is a machine that you can't turn off. And it's always churning and moving things through. And sometimes it's just bad timing and you're not going to be ready. So it's perfectly okay to say, I'm just not feeling up for anal sex tonight. And even when your cleanup does go great and you're super confident about how clean you are, there's still a chance that there's going to be some poop up there that's going to wind up on your partner's dick. And this is just comes with the territory. And if it happens, the important thing is to just not freak out. It happens to everyone. Both of you just go jump in the shower, clean up, and then finish your activities, in a different way. And this goes for tops too. Tops, if this happens to you and you pull out and it's a little dirty, just don't freak out about it. Don't make your bottom feel bad. It's just something that's going to happen. So just say, hey, look, things got a little messy. Let's jump in the shower and then we'll, finish up later. That sort of thing. So just don't make anyone feel bad about it. But again, super rare that happens. Just don't freak out if it does. Okay, so you're all cleaned up and you're ready to go. Now, I think the second biggest question I get is, how do you take it? It hurts so much, I'm super tight, I can't ever get anything in there, it hurts, I don't want to do it. Now, there's a lot of tips I've learned on how to prepare yourself for anal sex. The first is, as a bottom, you are in control. And I know this sounds counterintuitive to the traditional top-bottom dynamic, but it's so very important for the bottom to be in control at the beginning of the sexual encounter when he is first getting comfortable with that insertion. Let's quickly go back to that anatomy chart for a second, because the anus is made of 2 muscle groups, the internal sphincter muscles and the external sphincter muscles. The external muscles are the ones you can control by clenching and releasing. These are the easiest to relax, but you still may need some focus just to really relax them, because your first instinct, especially when something is going up there, is to clench. Especially when there's pain, you want to clench. And that's just the body's natural reaction. So you really have to be conscious of it and tell your body to relax as you're going through this process. So just inside the anus are the internal sphincter muscles, and those are sort of a series of ring muscles that open sort of like a fist, if you're going in this way. And these muscles you can't control. They're involuntary muscles, so they need to be coaxed into relaxing and opening up. And that coaxing process can be a bit painful at first, so it's very important to approach it with lots of patience and lots of lube. And really the process starts with foreplay. Foreplay is designed to get the area used to being touched and just to start having it relax and start opening up for the eventual insertion. Foreplay can start with just sort of rubbing the outside of the anus with some lubed up fingers. You can lick it directly if you want to, or you can get a toy involved. Fingers are sometimes okay as long as they're clean hands and the fingernails are cut very short. Dr. Goldstein advised against fingers just because of those fingernails, and they can do some tearing if you're not careful. But if you've got short fingernails, then you're probably fine and don't need to worry. But let's talk about how to start this process using a small toy, because that is the recommended method from Dr. Goldstein. So Dr. Goldstein recommends that you start with a toy about a width that's no bigger than the width of your thumb. So it's not too small that it doesn't really do anything, but not too big that you really can't get it in that first time. And really the process he recommends is to start with lots of lube. So put lots of lube on both the toy and on your anus, and slowly insert that toy and push it in until it really starts getting uncomfortable and painful. And just let it sit there for a second and hold it, and the bottom should really try and relax. And this is really the hardest part, because this process can often hurt. And really your first instinct when you feel pain is to clench up. And that's normally what guys do when they're trying to insert something, is they clench up. So you have to just sort of keep that in mind and tell your body to relax and allow this to happen. So really you push it in until it really starts getting uncomfortable. Let it sit there for a few seconds and tell your body to relax and get used to that sensation, and then pull the toy out. And then relax again and sort of settle down. And then repeat the process. So again, lots of lube on both the toy and on the anus. Insert it again until it really starts getting uncomfortable and a little painful. Hopefully you get a little farther the next time. Again, let it sit there. Try and relax your body. Try and get used to that sensation, and then pull it out again. And sort of repeat this process until you can get that toy in without it being super uncomfortable. This could take 5 times, it could take 10 times, depending on how new you are to the process and how tolerant you are of the pain as you're trying to get this working. But the point is, you really should just keep going and doing this insert and removal process until the bottom is comfortable with that insertion and they can take it without pain. And then, after lots of warm-up with the toy, if you're ready to move on to an actual penis, the process is very much the same. Lots of lube, the insert until it gets uncomfortable, hold it there, and then remove and start the process over again. Just because you warmed up with a toy doesn't mean you can go right in and stick it right in, because a penis is probably going to be a little larger and more girthier than the toy was. Now, for those of you who are completely intolerant to pain, there are some sort of numbing creams that you can use that sort of dull the pain in that area, very localized, that can help you get through this initial warm-up process. It's not recommended that you use those often because, pain is a good indicator for your body. You want to know when it's in pain, but this sort of can help you get through this initial insertion until you're comfortable, and once you've used it a couple times, you probably won't need it anymore. Now, I think this is a good time for a quick side topic about dick size. Because when it comes to dick and anal sex, bigger isn't necessarily always better. Think about it this way. There are 2 types of pleasure triggers for the bottom during anal sex. First, there is the cluster of nerves that is, clustered around your anus and throughout your rectum. And then there's the prostate, which is what they call the male P-spot. The prostate feels really great to be massaged, especially when you're erect, and that can really enhance an orgasm if it's massaged during the middle of an orgasm. But the thing about the prostate is, it's not very far up in there. If you look at this image of anatomy, you can actually reach the prostate pretty easily with a finger. So you actually don't need a very big dick in order to get that pleasure sensation from your P-spot. Now, I'm not saying that big dicks are bad, because big dicks can feel really good, because you do have all the added sensation of the nerves throughout the rectum that you're playing with. And also a lot of guys feel that sort of filled up feeling that they get from anal sex and with a big dick. But again, every body is different, everything feels different to each body, so it's always important to experiment around with different sizes and different shapes and see what you like best. But if a dick is too big, it actually can slam up against the back wall of the rectum, and that can be quite uncomfortable. So again, bigger isn't necessarily always better. Okay, I've been talking about anal sex for a while now. Let's wrap things up with my basically top 5 tips on how to have an overall good bottoming experience. The first is that bottoming doesn't take away from your masculinity. That's just stupid. You know, calling yourself or being called a bottom is just a label we use to express sexual desires. It doesn't mean anything else about the person. In fact, bottoms are in control at the start of every sexual encounter, and they can remain the dominant partner if that's what you're into. And bottoming just feels good, and people like doing it, and they shouldn't be ashamed or feel like they're less of a man because they like doing it. Secondly, we talked a lot about how to prep for being a bottom, but there are some other things that bottoms can do during sex to make the experience better for the top. Things like how to position your body for easier access, or how to use those sphincter muscles to add some extra sensations for your top. My advice there is, if you want to be the best bottom you can be, you also have to top, because you have to know what that experience is like, and what are the challenges and what are the joys of being a top. And that can help you think of those again when you're in the bottom position and adjust as necessary. Third, and as always, communication is key. You should always be talking about what you want, what feels good, and most importantly, what does not feel good. Because remember, sex is supposed to be fun for everyone involved. So if you're feeling uncomfortable or not having a good time, you should always say something, and you guys can make adjustments and see what feels good for both of you. Fourth, and this is very important, always use a good thick lube. Not oil, not lotion, not spit, but lube. And this is very important because you don't want to mess around with this area. You don't want to get rips and tears because that is just the worst to heal. So always use a good thick lube. I'll put some recommendations of my favorites down in the description for you below. And lastly, again, so important, if you want to be a good bottom, you have to actually bottom. So many times guys come and say, oh, I wish I was a better bottom. And I ask them, oh, well, how often are you doing it? And they say, oh, never, it hurts too much. Well, of course, it's always going to hurt if you don't practice, if you don't get your body used to those sensations and help sort of loosen those muscles up. If you want to get used to taking a dick, you have to take some dicks. Dr. Goldstein recommends that you have anal sex at least once per week if you're just getting used to bottoming. And in between those sexual encounters, you should also be playing with anal toys like butt plugs. Again, just to get yourself comfortable and used to the idea of anal play and get your body comfortable with the insertion process. So that's all I have for you for today on bottoming. What do you guys think? Did I help? Did I answer some of your questions? If so, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date with my upcoming topics. If you have any other questions that I didn't cover on this topic or any other topics, you can leave them in any of my comment sections below, or you can send me an email to thegayguide@gmail.com. And in the meantime, get out there and be who you needed growing up.